Hi, I'm Mary Jo. I've been a nurse for 51 years. I've lost over 100 pounds as a postmenopausal woman and reversed all chronic disease in my life, and I feel wonderful. I am here to share with you the nutritional science that has given me a new lease on life. And I sometimes like to remind people that this journey started with prayer, meditation, and reading Dr. Joel Furman's books on nutrition. The way he embeds physiology and nutritional science just speaks to my heart and soul. So if you're someone like me, you might want to take up reading Dr. Furman and look at his website. Another great place to look for nutritional science already compiled for you is Dr. Michael Greger's website, nutritionfacts.org. Okay, this conversation I thought should be a follow up on ages. So there was consideration that there's an increase in endogenous ages, which do age us, when there is a higher than necessary blood sugar. Then more of the sugar will glycate with amino acids, causing protein cross links, stiffening the tissue, and creating a toxic product, which produces dysfunction eventually with accumulation of ages in a cell or an organ. How can you diminish blood sugar so you can diminish this opportunity to produce more ages than you would desire to do? And so my first thought is, if you're going to sin, I shouldn't have said sin, right? But if you're going to eat something a little askew, a little higher glycemic impact, you think, but you just want to, it's better to do it in the morning because your insulin sensitivity and ability to use glucose to shove it into that cell and use it for mitochondrial energy is highest in the morning and low in the evening. Of course, that's when you want the sweet treat, but just a food for thought. Eating more calories earlier in the day when your insulin sensitivity is high helps your glycemic impact. Avoid or eliminate sugar and processed foods. Didn't think I could do that, but basically I have. Now, I have a sweet tooth and I love sweets. So if you're like me, you might and you want some ideas of what you could put together, especially if you want a really nice family dessert for a holiday meal. Well, first off, I always like the recipes on Dr. Furman's website. He's got a million of them. But here is another chef who totally, she was a culinary chef or a pastry chef at one point in time, and she has created delicious sweet treats. This is called Sweet Indulgence by Chef AJ. Found out the A stands for Abigail. She promised you an SOS free. She uses fruit to sweeten all of her goodies, and she does. And she sometimes gives you a higher fat or a lower fat opportunity, trying to find mechanisms that fit the needs of different people, which is lovely. This food is delicious. My only thought for myself only is that I oftentimes use less dates than she puts into her recipes because I've gotten to a point where some of her recipes seem actually too sweet as far as my palate is concerned. So avoid sugar, refined sugars, and processed foods. Processed foods contain a lot of chemicals, and the only persons, organizations that identify whether they're safe or not is the food manufacturer that uses them. So there's something called GRAS, generally recognized as safe, GRAS, and there are billions of chemicals listed under it, but that does not mean there's been any true rigorous scientific testing to see if they have a negative impact over time on the human body and on your health. So I prefer not to ingest them. Sometimes these chemicals are meant to be addictive, And I'm not trying to be negative towards these different companies because their job is to make money. And they can only make money if they entice you to buy more. So just buyer beware. I've been very successful at getting rid of refined sugar and processed food, and I love the food I eat. I love using fruit for my dessert. A second idea is be careful of keto, paleo, carnivore diets. Now, you will notice that the short term evidence related to this dietary regimen will demonstrate initial better glucose control. And you might say, that sounds good. What's the deal? And I would say, well, yeah, initially it's good. Why? You're not buying sugar, you're not buying processed food, so your blood sugar goes down, which is initially great. But will it stay that way in the long term? Because those diets contain like 4 times the amount of saturated fat normal other people would tend to eat. I mean, it's way more saturated fat that's even on the standard American diet. Now, when you eat saturated fat, like in a nut or a seed, that takes a long time to digest, and you just absorb like a saturated fat molecule at a time. And since it's so slow, that usually, depending upon what else is in your dietary regimen, allows that saturated fat to be usurped by cells to be utilized for energy, which is a good thing. But when you're eating tons and tons of animal products and saturated fats from a variety of different food sources, what happens is a myelolipid sheath will formulate itself on muscle and liver cells, and that will cause the insulin lock to become deformed, so insulin cannot easily open up the cell to allow glucose in. So over the long run, you're going to end up with people having higher blood sugars due to increased insulin resistance on high saturated fat diets. Also, the amount of ages that people on keto diets have is remarkably higher than their compatriots in the American system. So a person of similar age and weight would have, even on the standard American diet, would have fewer ages than the person on the ketogenic diet. But it takes a while to see that happen in those people. So I would avoid a high saturated fat diet. I have no problem with avocados, nuts, or seeds. Yes, they have saturated fat in them. Once again, what's your caloric need? They absorb very slowly. So, like if you are a heavy duty athlete, you might need a few of these. If you're someone like me, even though I do like to exercise a lot, I don't need so much, and that's okay. That's just fine. So be careful of saturated fat. Now, there's a fun condiment, if you will, out there that I like to utilize in conjunction with many of my meals, and it's called vinegar. 1 to 2 tablespoons of vinegar prior to or with a meal slows the ability to absorb glucose. Isn't that the coolest thing ever? I've found things like chocolate vinegar. Oh, and there's no added sugar. Yes, there's a sugar from the grapes in there. That is true. But there is no added refined sugar in there. And I just sprinkle a little bit on like a berry bowl. You could put it on oatmeal if you wanted to. Any little dessert happening. I make these cherries with unsweetened, I use frozen dark sweet cherries, unsweetened cocoa powder, and a little non-dairy unsweetened milk product, and I make it into kind of an ice cream consistency. I think it tastes exactly the same as Hershey's syrup without the negative repercussions. So I think chocolate vinegar is way fun. There's a lot of flavored vinegars out there. There's cherry. I mean, you could use cherry vinegar on cherries. There's peach. There's mango. There's fig. I mean, the list goes on, and you can mix and match, and it's just fun. I like to take vinegars and mix them together with maybe a white bean, maybe tofu, maybe cashews and hemp seeds, and in my Vitamix, and cream it all up and add maybe mustard or lemon juice, or like I said, I'd add some sort of vinegar. And I could add a vegetable, I could add a fruit, I could add all sorts of different things, and can create a dressing or dip that, once again, would have an adequate portion of vinegar in it. Now, I know a few people who like to ingest vinegar, especially apple cider vinegar by itself. I would never suggest you just drink straight vinegar. I think that would be too strong for the tissues of your mouth and esophagus. But you could take it, if you wanted to just drink apple cider vinegar, you could take it and put it in water, and you could drink that if that's what your preference would be. But vinegar does a lot of different positive things for the body, and one of them, it diminishes the glucose response after eating that meal. There are other spices, so I say spice it up, depending upon whether you want a sweet or savory delight in your world. Cinnamon can help dramatically control blood sugar. It's probably the most effective spice out there. Curcumin, turmeric, curry, they're all kind of from the same family. Another one that's similar is ginger, and chamomile, and green tea also can help diminish the blunt of glucose absorbed from a meal, and that maintains better blood sugar control. I, in particular, like to add legumes to several of my meals, and part of the reason is that they contain a lot of resistant starch. So let's say there's a half cup of legumes here, and we're going to say it's 200 calories. Well, so much of those legumes are resistant starch that, I probably only have 120 calories. So my brain says, oh, 200 calories, let's tell her she's getting full. But my food only had 120 calories in it, and I think that's great. Legumes diminish the ability to absorb sugar from this meal and the next one, and that is called the second meal effect. Legumes also have a magical capacity to not only encourage glycogen development in the liver, but fat metabolism in the Krebs cycle, which produces energy in the mitochondria of the cell. Not quite sure I can explain that, but I love that fact. Just another reason why legumes are particularly helpful. Now, there are a couple of food products that some people really enjoy that are known for providing a higher glucose effect than you might care to have. One is bread. So remember, any bread product that is made from a refined grain is high glycemic. In fact, sometimes higher glycemic than table sugar. Whether it's a white bagel or a piece of bread, those tend to have a very high glycemic impact on the body. I mean, it's just like eating sugar. Between you and me, though we both have different tastes, if I'm going to eat sugar, give me the candy bar, Anyway, but not today. Thanks anyway. You can find bread products, or you can learn to create them, but you want intact and or sprouted grains, and that's the healthiest way to make it. I like Dr. Greger's, I call it his rule of 5. So in that kind of food product with grains in it, you would like to see for every 5 carbohydrates at least 1 gram of fiber. Usually on the package, you're going to have close to 5 grams of fiber per serving under these circumstances, but not always. But if you can compute it out so that you have no more than 5 carbs for every gram of fiber. You have a high fiber product. And when you have a high fiber product, you can't absorb as much sugar. It's just beautiful. So that's the way to eat bread if you want to. If you need something already made, I know there's more products out there, but the only one I'm really familiar with and easy for me to find on the grocery shelf is Ezekiel breads, tortilla chips, tortilla. They're not chips. They're round, wraps. Ezekiel makes the best pita pockets I've ever tasted. I just love them. I tend not to have bread products excepting once a week, maybe. And that's basically because I just don't have the same caloric need as a lot of people do. Now, if you're a white potato fan, white potatoes have a tendency to have a very high glycemic impact, and current research demonstrates they are not a favorable food for diabetics because of the sugar raising capability. Now, if you're trying to figure out a way to eat a potato without having the same blood sugar spike, the one thing you can do is utilize crystallization. So boil the potato, then cool the potato off in the refrigerator. And now that it's cold, the starch, some of the starch is crystallized into resistant starch, which you're not able to absorb and will keep your bacteria of your gut happier. So I would still be cautious if you're having any blood sugar issues at all with eating white potatoes. I myself love sweet potatoes, and I have a problem. My other half likes to buy the world's most giant sweet potatoes he can find. And if I eat a whole large sweet potato, it is way too much for me. But I can eat like a half, maybe a smaller than a half, depending upon how big the potato is. And I'll do fine with that. So sweet potatoes are very good for you, have a lot of phytonutrients in them and beta carotenes in them. But if you're a small person like me, an older person like me, the caloric content might be more than you can handle. And so you just experiment with it and see what works the best. Now, another way to help blunt blood sugar responses is what I think Dr. Greger calls walk it off. So every time you have a decent sized meal, if it's possible, go for a 10-minute walk. That really blunts the blood sugar response from that meal. And of course, you can do other things. It doesn't always have to be a walk. It could be other forms of exercise if you would prefer. But I think that's a lovely idea. In fact, some authors have written that women who often prepare the meal and then after the meal clean up from the meal, because they're moving, and we're just washing dishes, but because they're moving, even that has blunted the blood sugar rise from the meal. Who would know? So, what do you think? If you're wanting to keep your blood sugar on a very even keel, have those sins of sweet treats in the morning when at all possible. Have the highest load of calories earlier in the day and lesser amounts later in the day. Exercise after eating, if possible, and consider 1 to 2 tablespoons of vinegar and different spices such as cinnamon to blunt the blood sugar response. Also, chamomile and green tea and ginger tea all work to do the same sort of things. Legumes in your meal, due to the resistant starch, will also help to blunt that response. Anyway, that's it for now. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope there's something from this broadcast that you can utilize in your world and that it helps you to feel better, because I just love feeling good, and I just want to share with everybody whatever it is you want is much more important, because this should be all about you. So with much gratitude and love in my heart for you, I thank you so much for listening, and goodbye from Nurse Mary Jo. Until next time. See you later.